And we're live. Go ahead, Peter. Ready for you.
Hey, everybody. Good. Hang on for a second. I got a little feedback.
Do you want to do it on here or do you want to?
Well, we're going to go ahead. Oh. Hey, guys. Sorry, we're having a technical issue. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it on there.
I don't know if it was the public.
Yes. Hang on, guys, and I am really sorry. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lainey Hendricks, and I am with Marin Health and Human Services, and this is a special town hall specifically for our community with disabilities. We do want to acknowledge there is a storm happening that it seems to be affecting internet connectivity around Marin County. I know that some of our panelists were having difficulty having enough bandwidth in order to log in. And so I think Peter Mendoza, who's our moderator, might be back now.
Thank you, Lainey. I really appreciate you because you have my back. And sorry, folks, I had a little bit of a technical issue, but here we go now.
All right, so over to you, Peter.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our community conversation event, COVID-19 information for the disability community, hosted by Marin Public Health and the Marin Center for Independent Living and the Department of Housing and Human Services and the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. My name is Peter Mendoza, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Special Projects with the Marin Center for Independent Living, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. I want to honor everyone who is joining today, especially those of you who are our wonderful audience. I want to acknowledge that, you know, this is a difficult time for our communities, Marin County as a whole, and particularly the disability community has had a lot of concerns and been affected by COVID-19. So I want to acknowledge this is a special time. This is a difficult time for our communities. So I really appreciate you being here. We have a great lineup this afternoon, but before we begin, I want to let you know that Spanish interpretation is available for this event. At this time, I'd like to introduce Colin, who is going to provide instructions on how to access the interpretation.
Hola, buenas tardes para todos aquellos que nos están acompañando esta tarde. Si ustedes quieren participar o escuchar esta conversación en español, lo que necesitan hacer, si están utilizando su computadora, oprima el botón que dice interpretación y haga clic en el idioma que desea escuchar, por ejemplo, Spanish para español. Si desea solamente escuchar esta conversación en español con la interpretación, a favor de apagar o silenciar el audio original. Si ustedes nos están participando por su celular y desea escuchar esta conversación en español, a favor de entrar en Zoom y busca los controles de la reunión y toque el más, o sea, son 3 puntitos. Ahí habrá de tocar Language Interpretation. o sea, interpretación de idioma y tocar el idioma que desea escuchar, que es Spanish. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Alan. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Renee Pollard, who works at the Brent Center for Independent Living as an independent living advocate. She has been with our agency for 16 years and has over 23 years in independent living programs. She's one of the first people that our community reaches out to when they reach out to the Marin Center for Independent Living. She is a subject matter expert around all things related to independent living, and she is much loved by our community. And she's going to talk for just a few minutes about her experience getting the vaccine. I believe she had her first dose. Take it away, Renee, when you're ready.
All right. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Well, my experience, I'll start from the beginning, which was the Monday before I went, when we found out that we were eligible to get our vaccination. So I was all excited, ready to go. Day got closer. Saturday was my day to go. And all of a sudden I got nervous, really nervous, wondering, should I go? Should I not go? Should I go or should I not go? But just thinking that what the outcome would be if I didn't go. So that made the difference. Got in my car, got in my little manual wheelchair because my husband was driving me at the time, and got up to the parking lot. I mean, everything was just fantastic. I couldn't believe how fast it went. I thought we were going to be in line for like hours and hours and hours, but going through the Civic Center to the back area, where the senior fair usually is, in those rooms back there, it became really easy. Check your ID and check your certificate and your identification for, or in your car while you're waiting. The car's moving along, so it took like 2 minutes for that to go along, 2 to 5 minutes. It was pretty smooth. And then once you got up through the parking lot in front of the building, to the parking area, of course, forget wheelchair parking. It was easy to find a parking space. And I said, oh my God, look at this line. The line was like, you could see maybe 100 people in line, looked like 100 people. But when I got out of the car, I realized that those were people that were behind me as far as their time. I was 12:30, and those people were already there for like 1 o'clock, 1:30, 1:33, 1:34. So almost every minute, someone had an appointment to go into to get their vaccine. So as I got out of the car, one of the sheriffs asked me, do you want to cut in front of the line? I said, oh, no. I see the line is moving pretty fast, and I'm going to stand right in line with everybody else, enjoy the sunshine, the fresh air with my mask on. And wow, it was great. So the line, I'm just going step by step. The line was like, the 6 feet distance, and they had markings on the ground, so everyone knew where to stand and not stand, and everyone just kept moving. I mean, it went so fast. I think I got inside from, from the beginning of the parking lot where the disabled parking spaces are to the inside building in seemed like 10 minutes. So once you get inside, they ask you, did you get your IDs checked, everything? Yes, we did. And so you move along the little winding rope area, 6 feet distance, and then you end up getting your card and your date, and then you go along down the road to the next room. The next room has the nurses that are giving the vaccinations, and also at the front desk where you sign in, they had the EMTs, the fire department. It was just cool to see that everyone was together on this, and it was working so well, and they were so nice and friendly, the sheriffs and everybody else that were part of the emergency group there, or the team. The one thing that I was asked before I went in the building was to check and see if there's anything that they can improve on, which was the access area, I guess, for the wheelchair, for people that are in wheelchairs and those that are carrying canes and other medical equipment. So that I did look out for, and I thought everything was fine until there was one little area that needed to have a little more distance as far as width for wheelchairs, and that was right at the doorway when you come from the cafeteria into the small rooms behind the cafeteria, if you guys know what I'm talking about. That area, and then into the room where you're going to get your vaccination. But that little area right there was just a little too tight. But after that, going into the room to get your test, it was so fast, so quick. You say hi, bye, and you're gone. And they were moving people, moving them. So my experience was great. You know, there was an area where you could sit and wait at least 15 to 20 minutes to see if there's any allergic reaction to the vaccine or not. And that was spaced. That was spaced perfectly also. And they had wipes on the table, you know, clean it down when you go, and when you come in, you know, when you leave, just make sure you leave your area clean. And then you just check out one more time, and you know, the guy at the door says, "Hey, are you okay?" "Yes, I am." Sign out, and you're on your way. So I think it took maybe an hour at the most. It was perfect. I was happy. It was perfect.
Thank you, Renee. I know I also had the vaccine. I took the first dose at the Civic Center, and I felt a little arm pain, a little muscle pain. Would you talk about any side effects that you might have experienced?
Oh, okay. Well, I already have. I stopped using my manual wheelchair because of my rotary cup in my shoulder, but that day I had to use it. So some of my pain in my arm might have been from that too, but I did have some pain in my muscle, and it came on after maybe about a half hour after we left. I started feeling, oh no, here it comes, here it comes. I was waiting for it. The anticipation was there for sure. And then as the day went on, it got a little stiffer and more painful. But when I laid down, it really hurt. I'm sorry, I'm not a baby about pain either, but it kind of it hurt. But the next morning I woke up, it was just stiff and a little pain, and a little neck ache. You know, kind of spread across my neck. But other than that, fine. Yeah.
Right. For me, it was like when I take the flu shot, just a little muscle pain. And I kind of thought for myself, you know, weighing the possible side effects, that the side effects of getting COVID would be much worse. So for me, it was just, I didn't have any many side effects, and it was a really easy process. And everybody was so kind to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's helpful when we go, you know, everybody was very welcoming, because I was a little nervous, you know, with the whole COVID-19 thing. So
Yeah.
I just want to say that I really appreciated on my end how nice and kind everybody was out at the Marin Center. So thank you very much. And we felt you know, it was important for Renee to share her story. And Renee is one of the best people who I've known for almost 30 years of working with her.
Yep.
So thank you so
Yep.
much, Renee.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'd like to welcome another good friend of mine, Aaron Carruthers, who's the Executive Director of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. He has worked in civil rights program for over 20 years, including in the state Senate for the California Attorney General's office and as appointee of two governors. He is currently carrying out the council's goals of housing, employment, and safety. Last year, the State Council on Developmental Disabilities impacted more than 2.4 million Californians, and was named Employer of People with Disabilities of the Year. He is the graduate of the National Leadership Curriculum on Developmental Disabilities, and he is currently serving on the statewide advisory committee. And he's going to talk about some of his work and some things that are happening on the state level and some possible advocacy opportunities. Take it away, Aaron.
Peter, thank you so much. Thank you for that nice introduction, and thank you as always for your leadership and the continued partnership for all that we keep finding to do together. We keep finding some good trouble, so that's good. Renee, thank you so much for that firsthand experience about what it's like to get the vaccine. We need to know the policy. We need to know what's going on in the real world. And I'm excited to see there's over 170 people here. I'm sure a lot of you were like me doing some storm cleanup this morning just to move about. there was a whole lot of trees down around here, and I know it took a lot just to get out of the house this morning. So if you're out of the house, you're calling from the house, or whatever you had to do today just to make it here, to be together in this moment, I really want to acknowledge that, and thank you for that. Part of that is that I have updated some slides that I just sent over. So I apologize, because I really should have gotten to you much earlier, but I think I'm going to allow to screen share here and do a PowerPoint. So let me make sure all the buttons are working here, and I think we are good. There we go. So hello, I am the Executive Director of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities here in Sacramento. And I know that many of you work with Sheridan Nicolau in our Oakland office, who covers Marin and the larger Bay Area region. So I appreciate all of the great partnership we're able to do locally in the region. Today, I want to start off with a message of hope. And it's from California's Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who says there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And today we're here talking about how do we get there from here. The lights appeared, some of us are moving toward it. There's a whole lot of bumps in that tunnel. So I do want to tell you about the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee that Peter mentioned that I'm a member of. I want to make sure that we have a direct connection with each other here today to share information. Part of that is me sharing with you what we know and what we don't know. There's been a few advocacy successes. There's definitely some work for more, and I'm just so grateful to be here to hear and listen from your experiences. So where are we now? Here's a chart that the state is using to show the COVID cases from tracking beginning of March 1st, 2020 through, boy, there's some funny punctuation there, isn't it? January 24th, 2021. And what you can see there is that we had that spike in July that we thought was a pretty bad spike. Initially, lots of alarms, everybody, flatten the curve. Then we had another summer spike, and we thought that was a bad one, but then here comes the winter spike. So whatever curve we were trying to flatten, hopefully that's the biggest curve we're going to see. But the point that the Department of Public Health has been making in their presentations is to notice that the winter spike seems to be decreasing. That's the current trend for it. As of January 25th, the state had administered 41 million tests, so seeing if people have COVID. And of those 41 million tests, there were 3,153,186 positive cases of COVID tracked by public health systems and surveillance throughout the state. Among those, unfortunately, there have been 37,527 deaths. So for doses and vaccines as of January 25th, there's been shipped to the state 3,319,000 doses. And administered, there's 2,587,736 doses administered as of Monday, January 25th. So that still leaves a room about 750,000 doses on Monday that were still in the pipeline that the state had received. We're still in the process of getting out to being administered. The daily rate of vaccinations, the state is up to about 125,000 people vaccinated per day. That's a tripling of doses from where we were at just the beginning of the month. The governor put out an order and a challenge to try to get 1 million people vaccinated in a 10-day period. And that'd be 100,000 people a day, but the state's ramped up its production, isn't exceeding that at 125,000 people per day. Of the 2,587,000 people who've received a vaccine, we've just crossed over, or we're close to the state's close to the threshold of 500,000 people who've received the second dose. So about 2 million have received a first dose and 500,000 have received the second dose. What do we hope for doses overall? So at the end of January 2021, hoping for the state to receive 4 million doses, and by the end of April, hoping to receive 20 million doses. It looks like we're on track to meet that dosage amount for California. Each week, we receive between 300 to 400,000 doses. So I'm checking my calendar. We may not meet the 4 million doses for the end of January, but that's about the rate that they're coming into California. I am a member of the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. It's been created under the Department of Public Health. The Department of Public Health, for its vaccine work, has created 3 work groups and 3 committees. One's a scientific safety review work group, and that is a team of California's independent scientists to look at the safety and review the information that comes out about the vaccines. This group is so well staffed and so well regarded and esteemed that it broadened out to be the Western States Collaborative. So my understanding is there's 100 independent scientists who are part of that, who review the science. From that, there's also the drafting guidelines work group that comes up with the priorities. We've been talking about phases, we've been talking about priorities and tiers. That's the group that is in charge of writing those up. And I'm on the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee that has 70 members. Fortunately, among those 70, there are 5 members representing disability advocates. I'm really, really grateful for the strong collaboration and really kind of a front that we've all presented. And that is Christina Mills from the California Federation of Independent Living Councils, Sylvia Yee from DREDF, Andy Imparato from Disability Rights California, and my good friend from Justice and Aging, whose name just popped out of my head, so I so apologize. But Justice and Aging has been a stalwart, fantastic advocate who comes from the aging perspective, but has been there with the disability community throughout. So I want to tell you what my focuses have been so far on the committee, and that's that the vaccine needs to be a priority for people with intellectual, developmental, and other disabilities. Now, notice I am the executive director of the State Council on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, but my advocacy position on this is that it needs to be available for people broader than just people with IDD. There is science and there is impact of this disease's terrible impact on people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also broader. And from that point of view, the State Council in its leadership and my advocacy has stayed stalwart that the advocacy we're doing is for people with disabilities who are impacted by COVID. And that is broader than just people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's broader than just people with Down syndrome. The next priority is that the vaccine be a priority for caregivers, whether those caregivers are paid or not, whether they're family or not. And we talk a little bit later about successes. We've got some good early successes there. Priority has been that the vaccine safety for people with complex medical conditions and interactions with other drugs. We have to know that there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy, and our community has many, many reasons to have vaccine hesitancy. Part of it is just the complex medical conditions people are managing on a day-to-day basis, and we just need to know how do these vaccines interact with our conditions. There are other communities that have a lot of reasons for vaccine hesitancy, and we're seeing that throughout African-American community in particular. And the state and our roles have a lot of work to do to just get people information so they can make the best decisions for themselves. From my point of view, that's the best thing we can do regarding vaccine hesitancy. And part of that is my last piece, which is informed consent. People need to know what's happening. People need to know what's proposed in that needle and what's maybe put into them, and they need to be able to have the information they need to give consent for the vaccine. So just a little bit of a review. We know the vaccines have been approved on Friday 11th. The FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine on Thursday, December 19th. The FDA approved Moderna vaccine. Also important to know there's 3 other vaccines that are in phase 3 clinical trials in the USA. AstraZeneca has one, Janssen has one, and Novavax has one. How they work. This may all be old news to you, but I still think it's useful to review, which is both Moderna and Pfizer are similar. They use a genetic code to stimulate the body's immune response specifically against the COVID-19. So think of those little spikes off of the picture of COVID. That's what they respond to. It was developed on a computer, so this is unique, that it's complete computer simulation is how they figured it out. No cells were used in the creation of it. What's put into your arm is something that is a genetic design. There's no live or attenuated or inactive virus. It's not protein-based. It's not a DNA-based vaccine. Many groups I talk to have allergies and really want to know what's in it. So I always like to present what the ingredients are. So the Pfizer vaccine has a few more ingredients. The main ingredient is the mRNA, and that's the piece that's designed on the computer. After that, there's a series of lipids that they have created: potassium chloride, monobasic potassium phosphate, sodium chloride, dibasic sodium phosphate dihydrate, and sucrose. So I'll leave that up for just a second and fill some time so people can review the ingredients, because if there's something you know that you're allergic to, you'll want to see it in this list. Anything beyond the mRNA is just used to transport the mRNA. So these ingredients are in small doses, but it still may be important to you based on your allergies, and specifically if you have a diagnosis of anaphylaxis. The Moderna vaccine has a fewer ingredients, and there's few that's in that transportation of it. So the mRNA is still there, and it's the first ingredient. Then they also have their own proprietary list of lipids. And then it has I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's a trace buffer containing sucrose and sodium. So I'm not a scientist, and I asked what all these things mean, and the answer was that mainly the vaccine includes fats, salts, and sugars. So there's the genetic material, then there's fats, salts, and sugars that move the mRNA, which is what is used to boost our immune system. Some things we know about the vaccine: it needs to be shipped and stored cold. We've heard all of this. We know this. We also know that both of these, you need 2 doses for full immunity. After you get the first one, you're about 50% immunity. You need the booster to get you to 94, 95% immunity, and they are 21 to 28 days apart, depending upon if you get Pfizer or you get Moderna. You come back 3 weeks or 4 weeks later for the booster shot. It is not known if the vaccine prevents transmission. So we don't, it may not, it's just not known. So we don't know whether or not people are vaccinated can still spread the virus. This is important as it relates to caregivers who come into home. If somebody has IHSS and that caregiver has decided to get vaccinated, they are in phase 1A, can they still spread it? So anywhere we go, anything happening or coming to our house, everybody's still recommended to keep up the good practices of wearing face masks, wash hands, and keep 6 feet apart until we know the impacts. Just kind of a peek into some of the clinical trials. For Pfizer, at least, there were 40,000 trial participants. 10,000 of the participants were Latinx or Hispanic, 3,500 African American, and 1,600 Asian. Among the comorbidities or other illnesses among the clinical trial participants, obesity, diabetes, respiratory illnesses, and cardiac problems. So we're going to circle back when we talk later about whether or not the vaccine is safe. Their children were not included in the clinical trials. Therefore, the Pfizer vaccine is approved for people 16 and over. Moderna is approved for people 18 or older. And both companies have begun clinical trials on younger people, and they're doing it in cohorts. So for Pfizer, for example, they're looking at a cohort of 15 to 14, and then another cohort of 13 to 12. The reason is this vaccine works on people's immune systems, and children's immune systems just function differently. So they just don't know yet how it would work. Side effects, Renee gave us a really good overview of those side effects. It hurts. It hurts in the arm. The injection site, 92% of people, at least in the Pfizer one, reporting pain at the injection site. And then fatigue, headache, muscle pain. I don't know about you, but when I feel fatigue, headache, and muscle pain, I think I'm getting sick. I think I'm coming down with something. My body says, oh, you're getting sick, something's happening. But I've been told by the scientists over and over again is actually the body building up the immunity and the response. So it's doing its job and doing what it's supposed to be doing when I'm feeling this way. I haven't gotten the injection. You know, I'm a male under 50 with a disability that would not be severely impacted by COVID. So while I'm fighting for others to be higher up on the party list, I'm going to wait. So I haven't seen this, but if you get the injection and you get these side effects, you're not coming down with it. Nothing's making you sick. It's just your body responding. Building up the immunity. Now, when they did the injections, they said there just wasn't a lot of anaphylactic or severe hypersensitivity reactions. I think that they've seen some more since then. And if you are somebody who's specifically allergic to some of those ingredients, you're recommended to either try to get the one that doesn't have the ingredients you're allergic to, or to not take it at this point. It does believe the current versions to be effective against the recent mutated strain. Although I think that holds true both for the mutation out of the UK and the mutation out of California. So we're in a state of scarcity. We're in a state of scarcity, and the state is setting priorities. That's a lot of what the policy and advocacy work on the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee has been. There's just not enough supply to immunize all people who are willing to accept the vaccine. That's taken directly from some of the Department of Public Health's language, and I think it's really important because I often get questions about a mandatory program, mandatory immunizations. At this point, it's still about people who are willing to accept the vaccine, still about consent is needed. And I have not heard any conversations about mandating the vaccine. So the state is looking to craft what they feel is a fair, equitable, and evidence-based prioritization of people who are offered the vaccine initially until the manufacturing capacity catches up with demand. And hopefully we're seeing some of that. Every day it's a different news story. I saw that there's another company who's offering to help manufacture Pfizer's vaccine to help boost the availability throughout the country. I saw that one yesterday. I thought that was interesting to get more vaccines out there. We know phase 1A includes healthcare workers and long-term care residents. Healthcare workers are in there because they play the role in maintaining the rest of the healthcare system, whether people need the help from COVID because they're ill with COVID, or they're ill with something else, or just need care for other reasons. Here's a success. Our advocacy on the Community Vaccine Advisory Committee was for a very broad, inclusive definition of healthcare workers. And so phase 1A includes this phrase of home health care and in-home supportive services. Notice that phrase is not capitalized. So it's not home health care formal. It's not IHSS formal. It's anybody who's providing a service that fits that description. So the Department of Social Services has released a letter to help those who are giving in IHSS services put this into practice, and I think it's been pretty universal. That's been smoother. Department of Developmental Services more recently released a letter for regional centers to use with vendors, but also importantly, those who are family members and who are giving home health care. That letter doesn't say you have to be paid to do it, and that's the right policy. We're seeing people have a little bit more difficulty in implementing that. And I know I've been on the phone with people who are sitting in vaccine appointments being turned away and having to argue and fight to get the vaccine in their arm that day. Some of you may be seeing something similar. So in setting priorities, the governor stated this week that we now are at, it was healthcare and over 75. We're now at anybody over 65 plus essential workers in education and childcare. People providing emergency services or first responders, or people doing food and agriculture. So that's a whole big wave of people who are now eligible. We see that where do people with disabilities pop up? It's in this kind of phase 1C, which is 16 to 49 people with underlying medical conditions or disabilities. So we are advocating, and the opportunity for advocacy is that people with disabilities who are going to be impacted be moved up from 1C into 1B. We think that can be operationalized by just stating any person who's receiving HCBS services are eligible. There are 10 home and community-based waivers in the state. And when we looked at the populations and who's being served with them, we added everybody up and we subtracted anybody who's 65 and over because they're already covered by the criteria, subtracted anybody who's 18 and under because they're not eligible for the vaccine. And by our estimates, there's about 400,000 people who are receiving home and community-based services that we think that's a good marker. It's a good indicator for the state to say the person's disability is severe enough to need these public services, therefore likely to be impacted adversely by COVID. The state's goal is to reduce deaths. We know that the deaths are severe. The state's goal is also around equity. We also think the HCBS marker is a good way to incorporate equity, as it really is at the crossroads of wealth, poverty, race, geography, and ability. So that's what we've been advocating, but we're having a bit of difficulty in getting that sort of understood. I think the healthcare system really wants something that's in their files. There's nothing in a medical record that says you're an HCBS services recipient, so they're having a tough time translating what that would actually mean. But I think there is still possibility for advocacy there. As you know, the distribution's happening through local county public health departments. In Marin, if they're setting up a committee to talk about who is eligible, I know there's a number of people on this call and in this town hall who have been active in advocating for a more inclusive approach, and I think you've had a lot of good success. So thank you for that. There's a lot of concerns, a lot of questions. How are we going to recognize healthcare workers who work in homes rather than hospitals? How can the vaccines be done from home for people who can't leave home? How do we get people with disabilities recognized and higher priority? If the people who are providing the care are 1A, why are the people who are receiving the care 1C? By my count and my estimates, that's about 19 million people in that space. That's half of California. So people with disabilities who are severely impacted would need to wait for half of California first. At best, I just don't see how that fits with the state's own priorities. So it's a matter of working it out and getting it reconciled. Also, how safe is the vaccine? A lot of questions we want to know about safety. The biggest known risks around safety are about the allergic reactions. I've talked about that. So again, if somebody has specifically a diagnosis of anaphylaxis, or if you're allergic to the ingredients, you're recommended to not take the vaccine. To figure out if it's safe for you, really make the best decisions for yourself that are based on what you know about the vaccine, what you know about your own medical situation, and weigh it against what's unknown about the vaccine. Many health providers just kind of say, well, we know COVID's really bad for people with disabilities, and that you got to weigh that against the unknown about how dangerous the vaccine may be. It's a strange line and strange approach. But if you have questions or you're worried about how the vaccine may impact you, talk to the person who knows your health the best, who also knows the vaccine, to help reconcile that as to what's the best route for you. So with that, I'll say thank you. Thank you for the time. I hope I covered enough. I covered a lot. Probably took more time than you wanted, but thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Aaron, so much for that excellent presentation. It was very informative. And there'll be time for questions and answers after each panelist participates. So I want to welcome Dr. Lisa Santori. She is currently serves as a deputy health officer for the county public health. Dr. Santori has skillfully guided Marin efforts to reopen schools during COVID-19 response, helping more than 82% of the schools reopened safely during the pandemic. She also leads Marin Public Health Emergency Response Program. She's working closely with clinics and long-term care facilities, services. Let me just start over. She is working closely with long-term care facilities to ensure equity and service in the delivery of Marin's public health program. Lisa, Dr. Santori, take it away when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you for having us today. I'm really thankful and humbled by the participation in this critically important meeting. We are so fortunate in Marin County to have true partnerships. You mentioned my work with the schools, and I'm actually at the County Office of Education because it really does take partnership for us to advance forward and to battle a pandemic together. And I feel the same way with our partnerships with Marin Center for Independent Living, Golden Gate Regional Center, our own disability access program, and all of the advocates in the community who are supporting us building an inclusive and accessible vaccine distribution plan. And so I'm going to pass it off to an amazing and outstanding new member of our team, Dr. Tyler Evans. He is the chief of our vaccine distribution branch, and I'll let him run the first course of these slides, and then I'll jump in at the end just to provide some framing of our work around, again, rapid improvements. We're building the plane as we are flying it, but we want to ensure this is an accessible and inclusive plane, and really are fortunate to have, again, you participating today and seeking your feedback as we course correct to make sure that we can distribute vaccine equitably, efficiently, and safe. Safety will always be our top priority. So Tyler, on to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so we're doing a lot of flying, right? Throughout this this seemingly infinite COVIDian storm. The good news is it's coming to an end, a beginning to an end with vaccines, and so we just have to keep flying, and we keep building as we're doing that, and sort of course correcting. But I think we're getting to a good place. So so I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of safety and sort of access. Aaron covered a lot, so I can probably just going to skip over some of our parts. So that we're not being too redundant, and get to the meat and potatoes as quickly as we possibly can. So let's move on to the next slide. And next, so as Aaron mentioned, a lot of the safety issues. When it comes to safety, it's really what we found is the confidence in the vaccine is largely related to the integrity, of the trials, of the clinical development, essentially, and so much of that goes into the way the trials were designed, and how that sort of connected to the actual production. The good news is the clinical trials were very sound. I mean, when it comes to vaccine trials, there's a very defined rubric that folks follow, and in order to even be considered to move into different stages of vaccine development, typically 3 stages, and then 4 is when it's out in the sort of in the general population. You have to, again, really follow these things down to a very specific science. So, happy to report that did take place. There were 30,000 people. That's typically the recipe for vaccine trials. So 30,000 at a minimum. And so that's split into 2 arms, 15,000 for the intervention, 15,000 for the placebo. For both. So, large trials, and in terms of signing folks up, they were intended to represent, the diversity and the inclusiveness of what the American general population looks like, and it looks like from the outside, looks like from the inside, and they did. And we feel confident that it was done well. I've studied the data. The FDA, of course, reviewed this very analytically. There was an independent review board that looked at this as well, and the vast majority of folks approved this. These are good trials. It's great science. The mRNA vaccine is new. it's genetic material that is, that is used to efficiently produce these spike proteins that we see in that sort of corona, which is Latin for crown, outside of the virus. And so I'm really excited about what mRNA vaccines can provide in terms of future future emerging communicable diseases or other sort of neglected tropical diseases out there. All right, next slide, please. Yeah, so we can move on from that. Just again, it's the vaccine approval process is it's very intense, and it's and it's ongoing. We keep watching. We keep watching. We keep observing this data. There's something called VSafe that a lot of folks are enrolling in that essentially provides data and into a national database to track what's happening as these doses are getting into people's arms. There's differences between what we describe as efficacy and effectiveness, and that's what really effectiveness is. It sounds similar, but they're quite different. Efficacy is under a more controlled environment. Effectiveness is what once the vaccines are out there. So again, we're tracking it, and frankly, what we've been seeing in Marin is we've been seeing pretty favorable results. We've had less than a handful of really kind of severe side effects, and I believe there's only been 2 to 3 anaphylactic reactions. Next slide, please. So what are the side effects? So this is often coming to us, doc, we're concerned about the safety, we're concerned about the side effects. This vaccine seems to have been studied and produced in a very rapid amount of time. The reality is this is novel in with respect to bringing a vaccine into study and then bringing it to into the general population within a year. But the Operation Warp Speed, the reason why it was done so quickly, it's not so much the clinical trial that was rushed. It wasn't rushed, as I was saying. It's the parallel mass production of the vaccine that took place, again in parallel. And that was an investment that the federal government provided. For Pfizer, they provided their own capital, but for Moderna, the federal government basically backed the product before actually knowing whether or not it was going to be approved, backed it and was producing it in mass quantities, so that once it was approved under something they called this EUA, emergency use authorization, it's not officially approved under kind of general guidelines or general sort of policy for FDA, but it's it is approved again for emergency use. So once it was approved, I think it was like on Moderna, it was like a Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. On lo and behold, Monday morning, at our doorstep was a package from Moderna. So that's never happened before. So we get these questions: what are the side effects? And frankly, the vast majority of the side effects, are those sort of local reactions, kind of soreness, redness, and swelling at the site. Anybody who's had a flu shot or other immunizations is sort of used to that. So that's the vast majority of the data, and really, when it comes to sort of more systemic symptoms, much less frequently noted. You could have some fever, some muscle aches, headache, feeling tired, and that's almost exclusively after the second dose. Rarely after the first dose, but sometimes. But feeling pretty confident about it. And even when we looked at certain subset analysis, older adults, they safety and efficacy data were very similar with them, and that's so important because they are certainly at risk. Next slide. Right. So yeah, I think Aaron touched upon allergies. The main part to just kind of focus on here is which allergies are a go, and which allergies are maybe we should consider it, talk to your doctor kind of thing. And And so we describe in medical terms, we use, words with a lot of syllables to make us sound smart. Contraindications, you'll hear that word. So the only real contraindications, that's a hard stop, is if you have an allergy to any of the substances that are in the vaccine. And folks ask, well, how would I know what that is? That's a good answer. Or that's a good question rather. But the answer is really, polyethylene glycol or PEG. That's the most common one. So if folks have an allergic reaction to that, that's a no-go. For some of these others, you probably would not know that, and you could talk to your doctor about it. And I know that that's not incredibly helpful, but that's kind of all we're going with at this point. But it's not that common that people would have that information, and so don't feel don't feel in a sort of unique situation if you don't have that information. But if you heard PEG, if you heard any allergy to PEG, that's a no-go. Or if you had a serious allergy to the first dose, then that's a no-go too. Next slide. But if you've had any severe reaction to any other type of vaccine, that's a maybe. That's a discussion you're going to have with your doctor. Next slide, please. So we'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 vaccinations in the county, where we're at, and where we want to be. So this dashboard's great. This is on our website and can be really helpful. And ultimately, what we're responsible for at the local health department level is getting doses into arms as quickly as we possibly can, right? So we don't want to be sitting on doses. We have an internal objective where we want to be sitting on less than 1,000 doses at the end of the week. So basically the minute that they come in, we've got a plan, to get them out as quickly as we possibly can. So this is where we're at. So, 20,262 folks have been vaccinated with at least one dose. Our biggest sort of, arithmetic, acrobatics is in the second doses. It's challenging to keep up with, but it's important. CDC did provide some recent recommendations that you can extend out that second dose up to about 6 weeks or 42 days after the first dose. Not ideal, but it can be done, if you're in a stretch. But anyways, right now we are in that sort of second dose phase. I mean, we have been for a while. But at this point, close to 4,000 have been vaccinated with that second dose. And it's that second dose that you need. That's when you get to that 94, 95% a week after that. In terms of, looking at our population, we're at 8% roughly of Marin County. So that's not bad. And we're really, I know that doesn't seem like a lot. It's glass half empty or 8% empty, I guess, or full. To the population, but we believe this is 8% full, and we will get to the other 92% or whatever we need to get to reach this herd immunity that I'm sure many people have heard about. Next slide, please. Right. So this has been our rollout. So it really started December 17th. That's when we first got our first doses, and that same day, so it was December 16th. That's when we got our first doses, and that same day we had folks vaccinated. It was really fantastic to see that quick turnaround. We had our colleagues over at Kaiser and Marin Health just picking up the doses, and we had folks being vaccinated that same day. And then that same week, the next day, we started with our skilled nursing facility staff, because we recognized that the skilled nursing facilities were really at the highest risk of infection and worse. So we wanted to basically cocoon them as much as possible by covering the staff. Next slide. And as this progresses, we just keep going with our phases and tiers. Phases are essentially a guidance from the CDC's immunization branch called the ACIP. tiers, and then they have a number of subphases. Then tiers are the state's sort of interpretation of prioritization, based upon kind of national guidance. And then local health departments, we take that and we run with it. We have to follow. Our mandate is to follow the tier and the phase structure. Within that, we're able to discuss kind of how we can prioritize sort of different people within those tiers, based upon what level of risk they're at. So a lot of folks are asking, how will I know when I'm able to be eligible to receive the vaccine? How can I get the dose? Enough talking about the vaccine. How do I get it to myself and my family to get everyone safe and protected? Next slide. So we have a great website that is just super helpful, that essentially can help field some of these questions. And there's a form now which is great. It's called the vaccine interest form. You can see it there in that bubble, and that it allows folks to provide information about themselves, to identify information, so that once we are ready, and I know it's probably been confusing to a lot of the population, like we heard teachers, and we heard first responders, and these other groups, healthcare workers, there were all these different tiers. And I know that was confusing. We apologize. It's, again, we go with what the state gives us. We may or may not agree with it, but we have to go with our orders. Where we're at now, I think a lot of us are happy with the fact that it's just age-based right now. We're also still covering healthcare workers, but it's 75 and older. We'll to be getting to 65 and older, at some point, but we've got a lot of work to do. And ultimately our output is the result of how many doses that we're getting from the state. So we're moving quickly, but this interest form is helpful because you can register your information and kind of tell a little bit more about, who you are, your background, some demographic information. And then that, once we're ready for those tiers, we can kind of socialize that information to folks to how to register. Next slide, please. And this just kind of goes into the form a little bit further. There are certain comorbidities that we're looking at, so risk factors. One of them being intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, and so that would put people at a higher risk. And we don't know exactly when those folks are going to be identified by the state, but that's something that we can capture that information now. That's relevant to our audience today. Next slide. So how do I register for the vaccine appointment when it's my turn, right? So that's another really, really important question. So you submit your information into the interest form, and then you get a message, and you're being told essentially it's your turn. Next slide. And we're getting to that point where we're getting this really organized and streamlining this process so that it really is that easy. So then you go to that other button, okay? So to the right of that vaccine interest form, just chronologically, and you go to vaccine options, and you just click on that little calendar. Next slide. And then you click on that, and then you go into this portal. It's called PrepMod for now. Might be replaced, and it's pretty straightforward. You're just going to put in your information, and then you choose the time and whatnot, and works reasonably well. There's some works with it. We're also working on a phone option too, because we realize that access to internet could be is not universal, or uniform. So we want to provide as many opportunities as we can, and with as many sort of assisted devices as we possibly can. So what's it like to visit the mass vaccination site, right? This is something that I think a lot of people are curious about. Our mass vaccination site, we call it a pod, point of dispensing. And you know, at our Marin Center, it's our super pod. We have 2 pods open right now. The other one's at the Kerner campus by the canal. But it's, you know, it's I think it's pretty fantastic. Next slide. You know, it's just an excellent you know, process. It's really, I think it's really well organized. And you know, we've got lines that essentially kind of sneak through, call them the Disneyland lines, you know, and make people feel comfortable, and, you know, move as efficiently as we possibly can. We keep working on that, you know, but I mean, I think for, you know, for folks with access and functional needs, we've really spent a lot of time trying to think about how we can make the experience as efficient and comfortable as possible. And we've got, you know, it was a work in progress, but I think we've gotten to a good place. And I think Dr. Santoro is going to walk us through a little bit of that piece, because she was really instrumental in creating that. But Lisa, are you there? All right. Well, I could start. So essentially, you know, you walk in and you meet the greeter, and this is just for the general population. But you meet your greeter. We call it triage because it's greeter and triage. Triage meaning kind of, you know, looking at the situation and trying to put people in the right line or box. Next slide. And then, you know, the next point, and again, this is just for the general population. So this is a little bit different, you know, if there are access or functional needs. But you go through the Disneyland lines, and you know, the second point is to actually register. So, you know, you go through the triage, they greet you, you know, make sure that you're on the list. You go to get registered, and then the third step is you go to get your vaccination. So you walk through this line, and you get your vaccination. Next slide. And then you are greeted by these lovely folks in blue and gloves and all their PPE, which can be a little scary, you know, to certain people, because you know, it seems very technical, but it's necessary for us to remain safe and make sure that our healthcare workers are you know, are not exposing other people. And you go there and you know, you sit down, you get your you take off your well, you roll up your sleeve, or, you know, provide some skin, you know, normally on your non-dominant arm, and, you know, you get your shot. It's that simple. Next slide. And then once you get that shot, then you're going to go into the observation area for depending on your level of risk. You know, we had talked a little bit about you know, side effects in the past, or a few other risk factors would put you in a little longer period of observation. So it's 30 minutes over 15 minutes, but you sit around there, you hang out, and then importantly, you register for your second appointment there. There's QR codes that can help folks do that. Next slide. Now, again, this is for access and functional needs. We have created a slightly different process, and that's new, and that's why they're not on the slides, but that's a little easier. And then oh, there's Lisa. And then you know, and then in terms of our, you know, additional points of dispensing, as I mentioned, the Marin Community Clinics is partnering up with us to provide you know, another point or pod over at the Kerner campus by the canal. And then we've got a mobile unit too, which is great. We're excited about, which is it's a joint partnership between, you know, Kaiser and Marin Health and the fire department, and we've got, you know, paramedics, and we're going out to different. Right now, we're in long-term care facilities, and we're looking at other areas of risk where we're bringing the vaccines out to people. And then the next is going to be in Southern Marin in partnership with Marin Health. Lisa, is there anything more about the specifically the AFN sort of, you know, sort of fast lane that we've created that you wanted to talk about?
Just that we have heard and listened to the community we've had some early participants in vaccination because they qualified for 1A, and really have taken in considerations to again, integrating our vaccine site, not having a segregated site, but also creating, as Dr. Evans described, some fast pass options that will shorten the course as people with disabilities are navigating through that environment. And then we also recognize, and just to speak to the mobile unit, we recognize that many people are living at home and have transportation barriers, may not have supports, family supports or other social supports to access our point of dispensing. So we'll be using data. We have an amazing epidemiology team to identify geographic areas where there's a higher proportion of individuals right now who are over the age of 75, but also looking at the data from our own JOT form that Dr. Evans described earlier, where people are self-identifying, where they may have disabilities and need to be prioritized for access to vaccination, and developing a strategy that prioritizes our deployment of our mobile unit based on data where we can optimize the vaccination rates among our population. So I think you can jump ahead now to the next slide. And so this just reinforces where we are. There's some conversations. We did launch our pod. If you can imagine that pod that was navigated by some of you already. Originally, it was only doing 100 to 200 people a day. And so we piloted a full-scale launch with another group of identified in the governor's 1B tier 1, that's school and child care providers, when we launched up to the capacity of vaccinating more than 1,000 individuals a day. Right now, though, we're moving in a strategic direction to target vaccinating older adults over the age of 75 due to the higher case fatality rates that we're seeing in this population. Almost 20%, 15% of individuals who are diagnosed with COVID-19 who are over the age of 75 lose their lives to COVID-19. And there's a significant difference between that age group and every other age group. And so right now, with a very limited supply, and we can't say this enough, is we have a very scarce allocation of vaccine supply, and we're prioritizing that for the 75 plus population. And so childcare workers and school staff at this time are no longer able to enter our pod, but we were fortunate to vaccinate a large group of them as we piloted the full-scale launch of our point of dispensing site. You can jump to the next slide. This might be where I think, Tyler, do you want to take over here, or you want me to run with this for a little bit?
Yeah, I could. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is where we're where we're at, kind of just in terms of the nuts and bolts. We're getting about 3,000 to 5,000 doses per week. It's certainly limited. It's it's uncertain. Unfortunately, we don't really, as I was describing before, we don't really know what those amounts are going to be until less than a week ahead of time. But it's not the state's fault. It's nobody's real fault. It's just the way we're kind of, again, building the plane as we're flying. So so the federal government is working on increasing that dose production, and we're told that with the Biden administration that dose production will increase significantly over the next few weeks. But yeah, so we're as Lisa mentioned, we're in 75 or older, and it just makes so much sense, right? Like most of the what we describe as the mortality, most of the folks having the worst possible outcomes are in this age range. So it makes sense. So it's 23,000. This is roughly 10%, a little less than 10% of the county. So it's going to take time because again, we're only getting this 3,000 to 5,000 doses per week. But we're working as quickly as we can. Next slide. And this, I think, just makes so much sense. Again, this is that mortality data that I was talking about. And without getting too technical here, it's pretty clear that we use something called case fatality rate. So essentially, those that are infected, how many of those pass away? And in terms of 75 and above, it's close to 15% versus 0.04% for 49 and below. So it's pretty clear, and not of course human lives are all very different. So this is all statistical pooled data, but if you kind of compare those two, you're over 300 times more likely to prevent a death in vaccinating somebody who's 75 and older versus somebody who's less than 50. So pretty pretty compelling data. Next slide. And it's just, it's just sort of, it's simple. It's easy to describe to the public. There's no, there's no biases. There's no kind of, comparisons or rivalries between different groups. It's just clear, everybody's, it's just age based, right? We all will reach a certain age, and we got to make sure that we're protecting, folks in that age group. So, I think then the next part is just really sort of ensuring access, because, the people that are at risk, they need to get in there. So I think Lisa, you probably want to talk a little bit more about this part.
And this is a place that we are really thankful to have a really strong team that has been working with us since the beginning of the pandemic response. Peter Mendoza, Lainey Davidson, Suzanne Levine, who are the core of our access and functional needs team in the Emergency Operations Center. And they have been working with us since the beginning to ensure that we are making our communications and providing information in a way that's accessible to all in Marin. And we always can improve, and we seek improvements. We learned quickly after piloting with a younger population in childcare workers and teachers that once we shifted up to the older adult populations, we really needed to accelerate the implementation of non-digital options for scheduling. So we have had an emergency meeting yesterday to rapidly accelerate getting a call center ready, so people who do not have web-based access will be able to call in and schedule an appointment. And again, really that priority of making sure this is an inclusive vaccine distribution strategy. We also know is that once someone calls in for an appointment, that there's other questions that we need to ask, especially related to transportation. Not everyone in Marin County, especially as we are working with some of the older populations and people with disabilities, have secure transportation. Honestly, many people have been staying at home and shut in. And so they haven't had a need for transportation. So we'll be working with community-based organizations to ensure that when someone calls to schedule that appointment, a case navigator or care navigator will be able to ask them some critical questions to ensure that they're ready to go to the pod. And so ensuring they have transportation and ensuring that they may have a caregiver or some other person to, if necessary, to support their movement through our vaccine clinic. Lainey Davidson visited our site yesterday or earlier this week. And again, we'll be making improvements to the site to ensure that it is accessible, and also to learn what our improvements from that Marin Center pod, or we call it a super pod, as we develop and implement more points of dispensing to ensure that we can translate the lessons learned at these sites to future sites. So we can, again, always are ensuring accessible and inclusive vaccine distribution. And also, we've been really fortunate. I started off the meeting saying it really is partnership. Many of the people that are on this call are just a phone call away from me. We saw an oversight, for example, when we posted our JOT form or interest form, we did not, it was just an omission. We moved so quickly, and we did not include a checkbox for people to self-identify if they have intellectual or developmental disabilities. And Dr. Lynn from the Golden Gate Regional Center sent me an email right away, and within minutes we were able to update that website. And that's really where it's truly an all hands on deck. We value everyone's point of view and perspective, and that it takes everyone looking at our strategy from different windows to make sure that it's achieving our goals of being equitable and inclusive as well as safe. And so we'll be depending on many of the community-based organizations to teach us how to improve our systems, because we're going to be running this way for the next 6 months. It's going to take us time to receive vaccine and distribute it. And it's our collaboration and relationships that are going to yield our success. So you can jump to the next slide. And lastly, our community advisory board, we will have a full launch this Friday. But this is, I think it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, of really having the people in the community having the information that they need to make an informed decision about getting the vaccination, and identifying any barriers. And there's barriers, many barriers. There are those of us who have privilege and who have access to information and have access to web information and a lot of resources. And then there's others that have many significant barriers that may make making that decision around getting vaccinated challenging. And so our goal with the Community Advisory Board is to have a representative and inclusive board that can inform us as we move forward with the vaccine distribution strategy, ensuring that the community is ready and they have the information they need. They've received the information in a language that meets their needs, or at a fluency level that meets their needs. And then also is culturally informed, and that really is aware of some of the cultural beliefs or religious beliefs that may be informing their decision, and making sure that we are delivering the information that they need. And so you can see the goals of that below. I'd be repeating myself again, but since the beginning, we've been focused on having an equitable COVID-19 emergency response. And that starts from the beginning of ensuring testing is equitably distributed, and we're using data from our community to inform our strategies. And that now will conclude, and hopefully we'll be leaning into the summer where we have equitably distributed this vaccine across the community. And we know that some residents will need more supports, more information to make those informed decisions about getting vaccinated. Jump to the next slide. So we need your help, and you've heard us saying a lot. I think everyone has said we have very limited access to vaccine supply. We need to be patient. It's going to take us time. We want everyone to get vaccinated, but we want to do it in a way that is, again, equitable and that prioritizes populations where we can have the greatest impact, which is why we started with our nursing homes, where we saw the largest outbreaks and the largest proportion of deaths that were happening in our community. With limited vaccine supply, we also had a cocooning strategy. So working to make sure that caregivers who were in the homes of people with medical needs or with disabilities had access to vaccinations. Everyone will get vaccinated, but it's going to take us some time. Jump ahead. And thank you very much. There you go. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evans and Dr. Santora. And I just wanted to provide a little background on Dr. Evans, since he's new to our community, along with serving as the Deputy Public Health Officer, really leading our COVID-19 vaccination activities. He served as the Chief Medical Officer for the New York City Office of Emergency Management, focusing on COVID-19 response. He's also held several medical positions overseeing community health centers focusing on homelessness, substance abuse, and migrant health, as long as leading infection disease divisions and a number of organizations across the U.S. And I just want to praise the entire public health team for really being accessible and really being out in the community and really working to work out the logistics to make sure that the COVID-19 response is both equitable and accessible. Okay, so now we are going to take a few questions. For those of you, we only have a few minutes left, but for those of you who joined late, this is a community conversation event, COVID-19 information for the disability community. Just a reminder, thanks to those who submitted questions. And I'm going to jump over to where, excuse me. So we have a couple of questions. One that came up from Marin folks, Dr. Santora or Dr. Evans, and maybe even Aaron, is what do folks do if they don't have access to computers? How do they register?
I mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is where a little bit of patience is needed. We are working this week to be able to set up a call center. We had a meeting today. It's going to take us a little bit of time, but we are fortunate to have great resources in the community and within our own aging and adult services. And so our goal is by next week to launch a call center functionality so people could call for an appointment and also speak to a person who can ask the right questions to make sure that once they schedule an appointment by phone, that they can be that they have the transportation and supports needed to navigate to our point of dispensing clinic, our vaccine clinic.
Okay, we had a question about whether the vaccine sites were fully accessible, and I can assure you that Marin Center for Independent Living and the county are working diligently to make sure that the sites are fully accessible.
And I can just share one story. I was at the vaccine site yesterday. And again, I'm always impressed by the resilience of our disability community. A woman was able to schedule herself. She is bed bound, but was able to schedule for herself a private ambulance. She scheduled her appointment. She scheduled a private ambulance and navigated herself safely in a stretcher to be vaccinated on site. And I'm just so appreciative of that wherewithal and resilience and grit. It takes some time sometimes to be an early adopter of vaccination and an early navigator of our system, but we were able to meet her needs. I got to talk to her personally, and she didn't provide any corrections recommended. She felt that she had good access, but again, we're always ready and willing to accept feedback as our community navigates through our clinic on how we can improve.
Okay, and I had another question that came in. For people who are registering for the vaccine, there's no way for they want to nail to the space to include if they're immune compromised or have some other disability.
At this point, no, we're dependent on a state system. It's called CVAC system when you register. There's been a lot of challenges with that particular system, and the state is looking to deploy a new system with enhanced capabilities that could help inform us when individuals have need additional accommodations when they arrive on site, but that system is not ready yet to be deployed.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to ask a couple other questions. I have a question about transportation and also for individuals who may not speak English. For those who need accessible transportation. So can you cover those really quick? I know we're down to the wire.
Yeah, we are working with Vivalon. It's one of our leading agencies to develop a plan around transportation. They have limited capacity because of COVID-19. We can't pack everyone on a bus like we used to. So there's a smaller capacity. So we're working on developing a transportation plan. We've also piloted a walk-in capabilities for invited guests. So this is not a walk-in clinic, but we're piloting that with some subgroups, specifically with additional who don't have web access and who have language barriers, to make sure that we have the staffing necessary on site. And that's what we're learning, is to provide a more accessible and inclusive vaccine clinic. We need more people sometimes that can help navigate either by language or by having some of the walk-in capabilities. But just to be clear, you cannot walk up to our vaccine clinic without an appointment. It's by special invite only. You may be one day in that group invited to walk up. But again, we're really prioritizing making sure this is equitable access, and we're still learning how to do it better. And again, this is why having this meeting early with this group, welcoming you to provide feedback to us to inform our development of this strategy.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to thank all the panelists for participating. This is a great presentation, and there was a lot of content, so we didn't get to everyone's questions, but I'll cover that in a minute. Before we close, though, I wanted to remind everybody to get the latest information about COVID-19 activity in Marin. You can visit coronavirus.marinhhs.org. And on that webpage, you can also receive our daily status updates, which contains an overview of confirmed case data and other updates. You could also reach out to the COVID-19 response team at coronavirus.marinhhs.org/contact. Thank you all for being here. And this is also being recorded and will be posted on the Marin County's YouTube page later today. Thank you all for coming, and you're welcome to share it. Have a great afternoon and be safe.